Hi, so we're going to get started. Everybody ready? All right. All right, so hopefully you guys are all in the right location. You can see our presentation today is Marketing Indie Style. And we'll introduce ourselves.
My name is Justin Woodward. I am the founder and creative director at Interrobang Entertainment. I'm also a part-time marketer, and I help to co-found The Mix, the Media Indie Exchange.
And we'll talk a little bit about what the Media Indie Exchange is during our presentation today. My name is Dreskin. I'm an independent marketer. I work with Justin on The Mix, which we will tell you a little bit about. It's sort of a piece of our presentation. And I'm just finishing up a book on indie game marketing, which is going to be coming out later this year. There's a link at the end of the presentation with more information about Justin and myself and where you can get more information on some of the things we talk about today. So for today's presentation, we've got two different perspectives. My background is in marketing. I've done product marketing for LucasArts, did work with Telltale from their second through their seventh year. I've worked in tech and other different places. So I come to this, and I do work now for indies, helping them with their marketing programs. So I bring that perspective to the presentation, and then Justin's going to talk about how this all affects him as he's working as an indie game developer and other things that he does as well. And we'll also talk about how our experiences come together in different ways and sort of intersected and overlapped. So let's start with a quick question in terms of how many people here have released an indie game? Great. And how many of you have marketed on your own? And how many have worked with someone outside of your studio to market your game? Okay, so it's a smaller number. So we're going to try and, when we're putting this together, we have an hour, and there's only so much you can cover. And so we're trying to get the right level of content that will hopefully help with where you start and some of the fundamentals. So I think some of this might be information that has a level of awareness already with you. But I think it's also important to think about things in a very fundamental way. You might have marketed a game, but you might not have approached it this way. So while it feels like maybe I've already done that, what I'd like to try and do is encourage you to step back a little and think about your planning process a little bit different and see if that might affect how you shape your marketing plan as it comes together. So I'm going to talk about where, when, and how to start. Some things to think about as you're developing your marketing plan. I'll talk about different kinds of programs and vehicles you can use while you're marketing a game. We're going to use some specific examples, both from a launch that I recently worked on, as well as a launch that Justin did, and also fold in some other examples, too. And, importantly, don't be this guy. I still have people come to me and say, oh, I just released my game yesterday. Can you help me market this game? Or my game's coming out tomorrow. Can you help me market this game? Or it's coming out in a couple days. And I think the main point is you think about it as early as you possibly can. And you might not actually be actively marketing your game from the very beginning, but it surprises me that I still get a good number of people who don't integrate this into their plans at an early stage, and then the game is coming out. And you have a much easier task starting 6 months out, 9 months out, and further in terms of how you're going to approach your marketing. You might not actually do active programs at that point. Also important, there's not really a magic bullet. So you see games out there and you say, man, that game is amazing, and look what it did, and it's so awesome, and they just did this one thing, but that's kind of a rarity. There are people who do get that magic bullet, and they do have a program that just hits, or they have a game that just hits, but I think way more often it takes a lot of persistence, it takes a lot of some trial and error, and not every program is going to be right for every single game. So you sort of got to work your way around that and see what's going to, understand your game and who it's going to appeal to and what's going to be the best fit for a marketing program for your game. In terms of starting, I think there's some fundamental concepts that will really help you as you work your way through the marketing plan development process. And I tried to avoid, some of the jargon, but I'm going to lapse into that briefly. because it's useful. I mean, some of the jargon is useful because it's been around for a while, and traditional marketers will talk about the 4 Ps. And when you're starting your marketing plan, you think about what is my product? Let me define it. What are the features? What's going to be compelling about it? Where am I going to distribute my product? I think the way that you would market a casual game on mobile is going to be very different than you would market a deep game to a core audience, a more more experienced audience on something like Steam or Humble. It's really important to think about the price. I think that's another thing that becomes an afterthought for people sometimes. They, like the day before launch, they say, I'm just going to sell it for $1, or $5 or $20. So there's some ways that you can be really intelligent about how you approach your pricing and sort of survey the field and see who's performing well and price points that work better and worse than others, and not just say, oh, everyone's doing free to play, I better do free to play. So I think it's really important to think about that P of the 4 Ps, and then promotion. What are the vehicles and initiatives you're going to use to get visibility for your game? Also, as part of the fundamentals early on is who's my game for? The kind of audience is really going to affect the kind of program you do. If it's a casual game, if it's a core game, if it's a quick pick up and play game, or if it's a game that has an established audience or a specialized genre. Your game pitch we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. What's your elevator pitch? How do you describe it to people in a succinct and compelling way? Think about environmental factors in the release landscape, seasonality, and then who's going to drive marketing for your game, whether it's going to be you or it's going to be someone in your studio or you're going to think about hiring somebody. Also, as you're developing your plan, another kind of helpful building block is thinking about what shape do I want my initiatives to take. And a great model is, I definitely encourage you guys to take pictures. There's no problem with that at all, but I also want you to know that this is all going to be posted on the GDC Vault shortly after the show. And so yeah, it's going to be online somewhere, but definitely take as many pictures as you want. And I forgot to mention too that if anyone hasn't turned off the ringers on their cell phone, please do that so that phones don't ring in the middle of the presentation. So getting back to this point, I mean, I think you want to have your activities peak right as your game is launching. So be smart and strategic about what are your best kind of assets? What are the best things that you can have to generate interest? Trailers tend to be really good, or you might have an announcement about some really cool content that's in there, or you might sort of stagger out features so that you're kind of building to a critical mass, or you might have some contributors. So again, just sort of thinking about all the things that you're going to talk about from your announced time to launch, and how are you going to stage those in such a way that you're kind of fueling this ramp. And also important to think about how long you can sustain those communications. There might be a tendency of people to get so excited about their game that they just want to announce it, and the game's not actually coming out. Realistically, it's maybe not going to come out for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and it's hard to kind of keep that interest sustained over a long period of time. So sometimes it's important to restrain yourself a little bit and say, I'm going to announce it when I really feel like I've got all my ducks in a row, and I can build this launch and have a sustainable communication plan leading up to my release date. And just quick last point here is just kind of thinking about that last 2 to 4 weeks is kind of the critical mass as you're building interest. When you create the plan, I think it can be helpful to think about it the same way you think about your game development. I imagine a lot of people in this room are game developers. The indie studios tend to be the programmers and game designers and artists and so on. So, take that same kind of rigorous and structured approach, calendarize it all out and say, these are the things I need to do to get my marketing plan in place to have an effective launch. I'm going to have the plan done at this time. I'm going to do my announcements at this time. I'm going to stage my releases at this time, and so on. Just kind of really be kind of smart and intelligent in the same way you are about your game development. And while you're doing that, too, think about the calendar. Think about seasonality. What is the right time to launch my game? November is really, really crowded, and there's lots of AAA games. So, think about that. Summer can be a little bit quiet. So there's kind of some pros and cons of that. But think about that. Think about big holidays. Launching on July 4th is maybe not great unless you've got a game about American independence. Maybe that might be an okay time. But also, like the Steam Steam Christmas sale. If you want to launch on Steam and the Christmas sale is going on, they take over the whole website and it's all about discounted games. So think about all those things and just kind of be as complete as you can while you're plotting out your launch, and then kind of build back from that. Also think about other competitive games, similar games or games that you think might be vying for attention against your game. I'm going to briefly touch on the marketing mix here, and we're going to get into more detail as we get into some examples. But as you're approaching your plan, think about all the different kinds of things you could do. And this is sort of tuned for indies. Some vehicles, I think, can lend themselves to indies a little bit more than AAA. So PR can work really well. I always encourage people to develop their audience as early as they possibly can. And what I mean by that is, get an email sign up, front and center on your website. And if someone's interested, then you could get their information and have a conduit to communicate with them. And nowadays Twitter works really well, Facebook works really well. So build your followers, and then you've got a direct channel of communication to all these people. While PR can be great, you've got gatekeepers at PR, and it's all up to the editors about whether you get covered or not. But when you start having your audience of hundreds, thousands, and more of followers, you can sort of have another supplemental form of communication if PR is not firing for you. We'll talk a little bit about events and promotions. These are kind of all the different things that you could do in your marketing mix. And not all these initiatives are right for every game. So you should think about this and what's going to be most appropriate for your game. And also think about how the landscape is changing and how new vehicles are emerging. And a lot of these things are very great for indies and not so appropriate for AAA games. So, game jams. Editors pay attention to game jams, and they look for those content coming from there. YouTube and Twitch, I think the visibility of those is getting really well established with indies now. I think 3-6 months ago, people weren't thinking about the video channels as much as they are now. But I'll just kind of reemphasize again that is a super important and impactful channel that also can supplement traditional PR and can work just as well as traditional PR in a lot of cases. Again, I'm not going to go through every bullet here because we've got limited time, but I wanted to get these in front of you and also say, pay attention to other things that are emerging. I find Twitter to be one of the most useful news sources, and so follow a lot of indies and see what they're doing and see what's working for them and what's resonating, and when someone announces something, that can spark some ideas for you. So I think that's been one of the most useful vehicles I found, not only for communication, but also for getting intelligence in the space. So now I'm going to segue into an example of a campaign that I worked on and sort of walk through some of the points that I was just relaying. So Mini Motor Racing was released by a company called The Binary Mill. They're based in Australia. They had done a variety of games in different genres, all the way from kind of a comedy game to an action game. And so this was a brand new genre, a new franchise that they were looking to establish, but they didn't have visibility in racing games, or this Mini Motor franchise was kind of an unknown entity. They were planning for a December launch, which, as I talked about seasonality, I think there can be pros and cons of that, but that was their plan. And so I think we thought about how we're going to work with that and see if that could work towards our advantage. So that's kind of the broad strokes of Mini Motor Racing. It launched first on iOS, was the lead platform. So we thought about, what are the fundamental components of Mini Motor Racing. It's an arcade-style casual game. It's RC radio control games, and it's got some breadth and depth. It's a small studio. At peak, it was about 17 people. But as we looked at the game, I think indie, there could be a long discussion about what's indie and what's not indie. But I think a lot of times you'll kind of see these alternative, crafty, artistic games, and that can really work well for kind of the indie terminology in the press. So while we talked about indie to some degree, that wasn't our main messaging point, and we landed at a quick messaging line, which was Little Cars, Big Fun. Developing the marketing plan, we thought about some of the considerations I mentioned before: the nature of the game, seasonality, the genre, what we thought was going to work best for it, whether it was going to be, we had some good partner opportunities, which I'll talk about in a second. We looked at the channel. We put together some timed promotions, which I'll talk about, and then the team was also very nimble, so they were able to take advantage of different opportunities as they emerged. So one of the first things we decided to do was, with the December launch, we came up with some seasonal content. When I say we, it was them. It was the game developers. So there was, but we had that conversation and said, is there something we could do to fit there? And they came up with a great holiday-themed track, and Santa's sleigh was one of the vehicles. And this thing had so much legs that 1 year later we did it again, and they actually they used the gyroscope on the phone, so it was like a snow globe on the main interface. So they did some fun things with that to really help that connect with the seasonality. They also knew the half-brick folks well, so Fruit Ninja was kind of at its peak at the time. It still does really well, but they were able to get some Fruit Ninja content in there with a track and a car that was loaned out from the folks there. So that was helpful. PR, I think a lot of times you'll pitch things and see how it resonates with people, and we were fortunate that IGN responded well to the game, and they put it on their homepage. But again, we needed a balanced marketing plan. So if PR hits, that's great, but if it doesn't, we needed other things in our arsenal if that wasn't going to hit. But we had the good fortune of getting on the homepage of IGN by pitching them. Reviewed well, which helps tremendously. So I think game quality is always kind of spoken about repeatedly as a really important thing, but I'll just kind of reemphasize that here. And then we worked with the folks on the App Store, and we got a great slot at launch day, which, again, when it works, it's fantastic, but it doesn't always work, so you've got to have other things in your arsenal. And then that carried over into Best of 2012 on the App Store and Editor's Choice on Google Play. We also came up with a plan that had different components over time. So we launched in December, so we had a really nice peak. We went full price at $299 on tablet and $199 on phone. And then we had kind of a staged promotion where we were going to go discounted about 2 to 3 months in. So you could see we had a nice peak as we got into February. And then that peak you see in May, we were back at full price, and the team was thinking about an update. And what we did was we collected some features, and we turned it into, not just 1.1, but we turned it in 1.5, and we made it a bigger release, and we got more attention, and we got another feature on the App Store. And it was, I think part of the point here is not thinking just about the launch, but thinking about what's your sustaining plan, and don't have everything just about day one, because again, when it works, it's great, but you've spent 1, 2, 3 years on your game, and if you don't make it all in the first week, think about monetizing it over a longer period of time. So I think that's a really important part of the planning process as well. We subsequently launched on Android, which simultaneous releases can be great, and I recommend that as often as possible, but I know it's not always possible. So it fortunately worked out well for this game. We got another wave of interest and activity and reviews and App Store placements. When I talk about opportunism, the interest grew to such a degree that someone came to them and wanted to do arcade cabinets and different arcades around the world. So that's a little visual you see off to the side. Ultimately, the game's gone on to do 6 million downloads, which is great. There was a free app of the day promotion, which worked out really well, and they had in-app purchasing to help monetize that. So, I think kind of the summary point here is think about your plan holistically and think about all the different things that you could layer into it and come up with a plan over time that could be strategic. With that, I will turn things over to Justin.
Hey, what's happening? I'm going to tell everything or tell the main points through my perspective, which is an indie. I believe that marketing and sales emanates from the inside out. So when you're marketing, you're not only marketing to the consumer, you're also marketing towards your team, you're marketing towards your publisher, anyone you're gonna work with. So these are my main points for the whole talk. Socialize and relate to people, add value to people's lives, cultivate mentors, be persistent, resilient, and tenacious, pursue visibility, and what works for them works for them. So I say that because, when we spoke last time, people had questions about, specific points, and it didn't quite relate to what we did. It only relates to you. So this is the game that we released is called Super Comboman. This is our elevator pitch. And it is 2D side-scrolling fighter set in a sticker world with custom combos and hand-drawn animations. And it took us a while to get to the point where our vision was complete. I'm going to explain everything through chapters of my journey, and the journey was the plan, the journey, the hustle, and the launch. And it took us 4 years to complete this game, and many struggles, a lot of pitches, and this is how we rolled and did things. So as Joel mentioned, so my background was a graphic designer. I had a graphic design business. I graduated from the Art Institute as a game artist, environment game artist, and I went and worked for THQ for a few months, and I hated it. So then I turned to develop. Someone laughing. But yeah, so I started a graphic design business, and I cultivated some mentors that helped me through the strategies of business operation. And we released the first game, which was on iOS, and then we said as a team, let's create something that's bigger, has more production value, and that we could release on a console. So we created a marketing plan, we created a business plan, and the marketing plan kind of rolled into the business plan. And we wanted to spend most of our time on the game production because, we're artists first, and then, business people second. So one of the things that we wanted to do early on was figure out how we can market with someone else. And we figured early on that we would work with a publisher. We weren't sure how we were going to do that, but the numbers kind of spoke for themselves. So when we talked to mentors and we created a business plan, we understood that it would cost a lot for us to just pay someone to outright market for us. So we decided, that may be the best step. We did a lot of market research, figured out the visibility mechanisms for each platform, and that's basically how I talked to a lot of mentors. I had a mentor, Clinton Keith, who brought agile development to the games industry, and he helped me with the business plan as well, and it showed us, concrete details on how we were going to press forward with this game. So in the early stages, we had our business plan. There was a contest for Nexon where they wanted to create the next Maple story, and they had like a $100,000 pot for the winner. And we felt that our art style was perfect. That's our little character struggles with the talking fanny pack and the mullet nuggets on top. We were going for this anime wacky feel, and we thought we had this whole idea that the characters were all going to be stickers. And so when we pitched it to Nexon, we were like, okay, so they have these Nexon cards at Walmart and at Target, which they have different keys on them to get different abilities or just, money for their store. And so the way we pitched it was we had little animations and different characters, and we had our business plan. And the idea was you peel the stickers back and you get a key for different abilities and items that you can use. It didn't work out well. We didn't win the contest, but we did get some good feedback from that, and we knew where to move forward with our next steps. And it was a very iterative process as far as our marketing plan was concerned, and that really helped us because we understood who they were trying to reach at that moment. The next thing we did was we did a Kickstarter campaign, and this was in the early days before. This was 2010, so you could see how long this game stretched back. We released the game in July 2014, but we did a video, and the video was super ridiculous. It didn't have a lot of gameplay. We showed a lot of the team. We were marketing our team to people, and I think like our moms and uncles were the only ones who actually, put in. You could see the total amount was $1,000. So it really didn't get us far, but it did get us a good video that we can. And the video was really ridiculous. I went to Walmart and had those little styrofoam Earths and stuff, the planets, and I wore those on my head to be this character. So it was very entertaining, and we just kept iterating on our process for marketing. And that's what I was talking about, is we were marketing not only for, the people who were going to buy the game, but to the publishers that we were talking to. Right here you see the product positioning chart, which my mentor showed me how to do. It was a good exercise to show where we were going to, our target market was. You see at the very end, it's more of a hardcore game. On the other side, it's more of a casual. Ours fit in between. It was like a combination of Marvel vs. Capcom, Street Fighter meets Streets of Rage. Those are some of the stickers, and we have our product plan right here, our development plan. So different key points in time were like GDC, where we thought we were going to show PAX. We thought we would show. Those were some of our milestones. And how we also created the elevator statement is there to the left, too. So as a graphic designer, I knew the importance of presentation and how presentation plays into who you're marketing towards and who you're contacting. So we were talking to PlayStation, so I created this two-sheet with the Sony Vita and how it would work when you're swiping and the stickers would peel back. And it really resonated with them. Also, at the time, I don't even know why they did this, but GameFly had an Android program, and we were trying to find any opportunities possible to get the money and the marketing to move forward with our game. So that kind of talks about the pre-production and the plans that we came up with, but it obviously doesn't turn out the way you want to exactly, So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my team story. So after I was in my master's program for production and design and management, and the opportunity came up to help my mentor with a leadership forum at the IGDA. And during that time, there was also a contest to be at IGN GameSpy and have office space. They had an incubator. And when that happened, we pitched to them, and we used everything that we gathered beforehand. And they saw our video, they saw our marketing plan, and really dug it. So they gave us the go-ahead. They loved our pitch, and they were like, "Come up here." So we had to figure out within a week's time whether we were going to take that opportunity. And one of my mentors he's like, "You got to take life by the balls and just go with it, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." So I took the opportunity. I'm a very, very opportunistic person, and every time I see something, I'll go for it. And it ended up turning out well. We were in IGN, and we worked for 3 months straight on the prototype. So this goes to the training. So we had GDC. After the 3 months of hard development, we had a GDC demo space. And that was a great opportunity to talk to press. And 47 Communications, which is actually here in San Francisco, they had their lead Kramer, who used to work with Capcom, and they trained us. They actually came in and told us how to talk to people, because I was very nervous to talk to press about our game, or just to talk to people in general. And I didn't know exactly what to say. I would fumble my words, or I would give these lengthy explanations of things. And they helped me become succinct and concise. They also had press pitch sessions at IGN where they had like 7 people from members of the press come in and just rapidly fire off different questions, take pictures of us, and talk to us in a press junket type of fashion. I remember at one point I completely froze up in front of everyone, and I didn't know if I was going to jump back from that, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. So it was really interesting to do that training, just to understand how you market towards other people, because marketing towards other people, each member of the press, each publisher that you talk to, each person that you're selling to has a different story, a different background, and you want to make sure that you create that story that works with them, and reflects their ideals. So these images represent our time there. My mentor in the middle, Clinton Keith, and we were at the Indie Open House. We won the Next Game Boss, which was this reality show on IGN. We worked very hard. You see the cast of the Indie Open House, and just different people playing the game. So I'll say this is the Hustle Phase 1, even though this is like the Hustle Phase 8. We showed at multiple events and try to figure out how we can show free. And that's really important too, is when you're pitching, you show your plan and you figure out how you align with specific products and product holders. We at that time, I lost my team, so I jumped back and had to figure out how we were going to pitch and raise more money. And there was a lot of rejection, and I had to figure out how to bounce back from that, and we jumped to a second Kickstarter fundraising campaign. At the end of the Indie Open House, we had a large presentation, and it gathered the attention of Adam Boyes, who is now one of the VPs at Sony. And he just took me under his wing, and he was like, I want you to pitch to every publisher possible, because that was one of the only ways I felt that we were going to actually get the game out and market it towards a broad audience. So he took me to Capcom, he took me to Sega, he took me to EA, all these different places. Some people I just went to on my own. I was just pitching. And also, my other mentor, who was in business, she knew nothing about video games. So she was teaching it from a different standpoint, which is very interesting. And it's good to get multiple angles and paradigms when you're trying to figure out your road to success with marketing and developing your game. So at one point, I was in Berkeley, and I was like, there was this place called Cream. I don't know if you guys know of it. It's an ice cream sandwich store. And I was like, yeah, my character eats cookies, and it would be a perfect mascot for your marketing campaigns. And they totally got it. They dug it, and they wanted to do it. But the thing was, we actually we needed money too. So marketing wasn't the only thing we were searching after. So it didn't completely fit, but us, pitching how the marketing would work completely fit with their campaign. It was a good experience. These are some of the other events that we showed at. Hot Import Nights, they had a Dead or Alive 5 booth there. The Comic-Con, Evo, our game's a fighting game, so we went to the biggest fighting game competition in Vegas in July. So this is Hustle Phase 100. So we were going 100%. We just raised more investment, and we started a second Kickstarter fundraiser campaign. The second fundraiser campaign, I understood how the media and the press worked more, and I already had a lot of different contacts there. So all I did was reach back to them, told them that we were making this game, or we progressed in our game further, showed them new builds, and they were really interested in it. It got a lot of buzz that way. I also talked to the publishers as well. So I always reached back at different stages of development when we were trying to move forward with marketing, investment, whatever. At this time, the Mix was born. So as Joel spoke about, we created this media indie exchange at IGN where just the press and the indies got together, and they were able to vibe off of each other. The press got to see games they've never seen from the hottest indies, and the indies who, some of them, don't really speak out to press, even though they have great content and great tech, we're able to talk to them in a more closed manner, So we did a second Kickstarter. It ended up being successful. I reached back to publishers. Capcom really liked the game, but the deal it didn't really fit with us. And at the second GDC we were at, I went and pitched to Adult Swim Games. They loved the idea, and they didn't take it right away because they weren't working with Steam. But when they did start working with Steam, they were like, okay, let's do this. And it was good because we understood their marketing. They already had influencer marketing campaigns and people on Twitch, and that's kind of where things were going. And it really helped us to push the game along and get other people interested, because once they got interested, we were able to get more investor support, more press support, and the people that I contacted before, I used that as leverage. So so we were supposed to launch, I believe, in April, and it took a little longer to release because this was our first large game, and we launched on Steam and Humble. There was an initial PR fumble with the publisher and the production staff there. Early build got sent out to all of the press, but marketing-wise, it was a complete success because we got hit by every single, not every single, but most of major press checked our game out, gave our game previews or reviews. We had Northern Lion, some of the largest YouTubers checked our game out, and regardless if they liked it or not because they got a buggy build, it still got a lot of press, and the whole education of what we did in that 4 years kind of escalated to that point, which was really good. We maximized coverage. We built a mix out of it. We had an initial Humble Bundle with Adult Swim, and I cultivated a relationship with Humble Bundle. So what ended up happening was we got our rights back from Adult Swim because we wanted to start doing things on our own because they didn't want to support it anymore. And we released all of these updates, and we did another Humble Bundle, which was a Brawler Humble Bundle, which was pretty successful. And it also built our foundation for the next game.
All right. So yeah. So just kind of quick points to sort of wrap things together from my part and Justin's part. I think there are two different approaches to marketing, and I think some really great takeaways from Justin's presentation is a lot of persistence and creating things that could be leveraged for another program later on, and just being really open and nimble and flexible and thinking how you could kind of keep things going and kind of forge your way to launch. And as Justin was saying too. They came out with the game, they got the rights back, they kind of keep plowing ahead, they kind of think about the longer tail as opposed to just the launch burst if it didn't go exactly how they wanted. And, part of the end result is, here we are post-launch and now they're working on their next game. So I think that's part of the vision of the indie world is, best case, your launch comes out and it fires on all cylinders, but kind of next best is, you do well enough so you can keep going on to your next game. Something else that comes out of the indie world is that, it's a great community, and I think there's great opportunities to think about programs that not only help your game, but also help other games. And I think it's excellent how people work together. And the mix is a great example, as Justin was saying. He was working at IGN. GDC rolled around, and they said, hey, let's have some journalists in here, and let's get some other indie games too. And here we are. So that was in 2012, and here we are years later. And that's really turned into a tremendous platform for indie game developers. We do it every year now, and we have expanded from 4 events last year. We're planning to do 6 or 7 this year, including E3. We're going to South by Southwest next week, Comic-Con, SIGGRAPH. And so we're doing things that not only help some of the, Justin's game and other games, but we're helping other indies and give them a platform. So that's kind of a little bit about the mix and how things tie together. And how we started working together was, I was thinking as a marketer, it's great to work with individual indies, but how could I do programs that benefit multiple people at the same time and get some efficiency? So that's part of the connection with how our worlds have come together. And it happens, a number of times. It's been fantastic. The Humble Bundle started, as some of you may well know, as that was Wolfire, and they were marketing their game, and they were inspired by what World of Goo did with the pay what you want, and things kind of evolved, and they did, they were just thinking, hey, let's do a bundle, and then next thing you know, it was tremendously successful, and it became its own business. And
I was going to say something.
Yeah. So that's one example,
some of the developers at the IGN Indie Open House, we started meetups, and a lot of the developers came and cultivated, and we worked together and contacted Tim Schafer, and that presented an option to have an incubator there as well at Double Fine. Someone in the audience, Dylan, has Games Nest, and that's blowing up too. And that's how some of the indies work together.
So I think it's interesting that you market your game, but as you're doing it, there could be opportunities that not only help your game, but also can benefit others in the community. I think a lot of people know about Rami Ismail's press kit. It was something he developed to start his game, but now a lot of people use it to help make their press communications efficient. And there's some other examples here that I think people are familiar with. I'm going to segue into one more example for you that is connected with this not on Steam icon that you see here. And this is a case of another studio that created their game, released it, and found that it didn't perform how they wanted. And you'll see the first couple months, if this was you and your game studio, it might be a little bit discouraging, but they kept plowing ahead, and they were really tenacious and persistent. And I'll talk about some of the things they did to be successful. But one big takeaway here is that of their year one revenues, they got 90% of the revenue in months 4 through 12. So I think people might stereotypically think, everything I'm going to make is going to be in the first month or the first 3 months, and if I don't do it then, I'm sunk. And I think these guys are a great example. I don't know when they're speaking, but they might have already spoken, but here at GDC, if they're speaking tomorrow, I would suggest check them out, and they'll talk more about what they did. So they launched. It didn't perform what they wanted. They did a blog on Gama Sutra and on their own website, and it was 1 month later losing steam. And I think their takeaway was, we self-released, but we weren't able to get on Steam, and that's been a big part of why we're not performing how we want. That got some press attention, and Greenlight was going on, and they launched this. I'm just going back to the icon real quick. They launched the Not on Steam sale, and that was kind of their own creation. And they said, we're not on Steam, and here's a whole bunch of other game developers that aren't on Steam, and how can we kind of come up with a program? So they did what you know about Steam sales. They did discounted pricing. They had a Humble widget on there so people can buy directly through this Not on Steam sale. And they also had a link to everyone's Greenlight page so they can help kind of fuel their Greenlight campaign. And so that really resonated. Press found it interesting, and they wrote about it. They had dozens of developers over the course of this promotion. And then the other thing that happened was not only did Race the Sun get greenlit, but a number of other games got greenlit. And so you'll see this bump in December. And that, then they finally came out on Steam. They monetized it. They did really well. They kept plugging ahead. They decided to add Steam Workshop in March. And that gave them another really nice bump, and they did some promotional pricing. And then they had other promotions as time went on. So, and they're continuing on, and they're getting ready for a PlayStation release and so on. So, again, quick summary point here is just, while it can be discouraging, sometimes there's some trial and error, and sometimes just kind of trying and experimenting with different things to go after success. Just kind of quickly here, this is just, we talked about channel, we talked about PR. This is just kind of really quickly, there's examples of people who have done well with advertising. There's some people who have done well with releasing playable code with early access. There's people who've achieved their success through promotions. And not just price promotions, but sometimes working with other indies to have compelling content and PR. So some of these examples are written up in more detail on the link that I'm going to have in a couple slides, so you can read more about these. And in conclusion, just a couple of takeaways to take with you. Going back to earlier points from the presentation, begin early, be nimble, be flexible. The plan is very likely going to change. Be flexible, be nimble, and stay tenacious. Just go after it. This is important. You're spending months and years of your life in this game, so working on this game. So stay after it, and it can be discouraging sometimes, but tenacity will help you be successful. And if not the first time, maybe the next time. We talked a lot about relationship building and networking. Justin talked about how he was just so aggressive and persistent in talking to as many people as possible, and you never know what's going to pan out for you. So get out there, go to shows, cultivate your relationships, meet people in person as often as possible, and that can bear tremendous fruit for you. Have a mix of vehicles in your marketing plan. While it can be tempting to rely on just one thing, it's useful to have a balance so that if one thing doesn't fire, you've got other things to support your program. And I'm sorry to end with a cliche, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. Just think about it in the long term. This would be a great place to take pictures because these are some links where we've got a little bit more information. I know this is going to be posted soon, but there's more examples from what we talked about the presentation in the second link. So that's my blog. It's not super populated right now, but I've got some resources and some other links in there. The last URL here is Justin's studio in Terabang, and MediaAnyExchange.com is the events that we run together that we talked a little bit about. And with that, we have time. I'm just going to check my clock real quick. We have 15 minutes for questions, so invite people to come up to the microphone, and if you ask questions, please make sure you ask your question in the microphone so it'll be recorded for the video. Hi. Is the microphone on for the audience?
Doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
Okay, there it goes. So briefly, right at the end, you mentioned early access. And early access, there seems to be a desire from it on the consumer side. Like there have been several games that have been really successful. It also seems to have tanked games when it's been botched. So I wondered if you had any more thoughts you could expand upon with early access and how it ties into marketing and eventual success of the game.
Yeah, I think part of it is, if I can, I'm going to try and flip back real quick.
If I could briefly,
go ahead,
I think you gotta, sometimes when you're looking at early access, you gotta think of it like a Kickstarter campaign. Some of your sales will migrate from the actual sales when you release the game to the early access. So it won't dictate how the margin of sales you'll get later. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
So, and I think the point I was going to make with this slide is, think about the shape of your marketing plan. If you do early access 12 months before you're really going to release the game, you have the potential to lose momentum. And I think another thing that like Clay was talking about, how when they did early access and were successful with something like Don't Starve, they had a really good schedule and communication plan about how they were doing it. I believe it was every month they had a new content release, and they told people what they were doing and when they were going to do it. And there's a lot of things that made Don't Starve successful, but I think in terms of how they did early access, there's some good lessons learned there. I think it's important to think about having a good game experience. I think some people might fall down with putting a game on early access that's not representative of their final game. It creates a bad impression, and so that doesn't work well for them. So I think there's a lot of considerations that go into it, but I think the ones who have done it well, they think about their timing, they think about updates and communications, they think about the experience. So I think there's pros and cons, but when you do it well, you've got the opportunity to start generating revenue before you do the full game release, and then can do kind of a polish. Well, another quick thing there is if all the content is there in early access, then there's kind of nothing to follow through on when you release the full game. So you want to think about that part of it. So when all those things work well, then you can prepare yourself for a successful launch afterwards.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Hello. Thank you. This is strong. Thank you for the talk. I feel, I don't know how to ask this. I feel maybe for some people, I'm from Argentina, and maybe I feel some of those, tips are not reachable for us, because being on festivals, or maybe in GDC for us is really difficult, And when you need your resources to develop your game, it's really hard to use those resources for marketing. And the thing is, what do you think about? You didn't talk too much about creativity, I think, because it's like those are the ways of marketing your game. But I think there are a lot of more ways of marketing that doesn't exist yet,
So I could talk about Super Comboman. So Super Comboman was a fighter. There's something called influencer marketing, and we geared a lot of our marketing towards the fighting game community, and we got top fighting game personalities to play our game. We showed at different fighting game festivals and tournaments, and we creatively tried to figure out where it would fit within that audience. So yeah, you definitely, while you're marketing your game or anything, you got to think of like how to get in where you fit in. You know what I mean, so to speak. Is that what you're talking about as far as the creative aspects of?
I mean, for example, do you know Dumb Ways to Die?
Yeah.
The game. Okay. The video was something that they created previously, but what if it were like in the other, I have the game Dumb Ways to Die, and then I make the video. The video goes viral, and then I have my game.
I think
different ways,
Yeah, if I'm getting your point, I think it's creative content as sort of a way of attracting people. I mean, I've been talking about programs a lot, and you're talking about sometimes it's the creative content. Am I understanding your point correctly? That the content?
It's like I felt like that technique of being marketing your product it was out of the talk, you know. And
Yeah.
I think creativity, when you don't have
Sure.
those resources, is the main thing you have to. As indie developers, you know, creativity is our main strength.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's sometimes you have just this incredibly compelling concept, and you have something that really resonates, and the job becomes a lot easier, you know. And sometimes you have this incredibly compelling piece of marketing content. You know, maybe it's like this great viral video, or maybe it's you know, a program. So absolutely, I think there's tons of value in that, and thank you for bringing that into the conversation.
Thank you. And if I can, I would just one more thing. As game designers, indie developers, I think we have to ask the game to marketing itself. You know, like tools like Twitter, or I don't know. There's a lot of ways of making your game create content automatically by the user content, or other ways that you don't have to work for creating that content.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's people who want to believe in the field of dreams, you know, where if you build it, they will come, and when you're lucky, that works. But I think depending on that can be a challenge, and so I guess from a marketer perspective, I encourage you to, you know, to think about what else you could do. I mean, if you're lucky, it's great, and I think also from the outside, it looks easier than it really is. You know, you see these great examples and you say, oh, that was super easy for them. But in reality, they might have done like 5 games before that, or they might have done 20 other things for that game before the thing really fired. So, yeah, so next question.
Hey guys. Holy, well, good to see you. So you talked about all the things that you shouldn't do, and we just released a game a little less than a month ago, and we did all of those things. And we didn't advertise it at all, and we built it, and they haven't really come. The big reason for that, though, oh, by the way, the game is called Blitzkeep. It's on iOS and Android. Go get it right now, please.
Yes,
okay, thank
See,
you.
there you are. You're being persistent. So
It's creative, right? That's what he's talking about. It's a new thing. Anyway, so we work on it totally part-time. That's kind of a big challenge I've had. I've always been making indie games part-time, and yeah, I've gone to some of your events and stuff, and how do you really ever, is there kind of like a few things that you can do when you're someone who's working on a game 10, 15 hours a week, like to get this stuff, rather than, you know, someone who's got all of their time? Like, would you say what's like the top things or something?
Well, I mean, I think
Hire somebody.
Hire somebody.
Like Joel or John. There's a lot of people out there now that used to be, you know, full-time marketers and now want to do it for indie game companies, and they will take that off your hands. Because that was the issue I had. I mean, I didn't market full-time at all. You know, I wanted to spend most of my time in production. I was producing full-time, but I wanted to figure out different ways to implement marketing without me spending as much time. So I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, I think part of it is, you know, having the discipline to just, even if you're not going to be spending a lot of time executing, just having the discipline to think about, what do I want my marketing plan to be? Like, you have your milestones in development, and you have your development tasks, and either you're doing it yourself or someone is helping you, but having the discipline to say, you know, 6, 9, 12 months before launch, what do I want to do? And I might not have time to do it every week, but you could at least think about the content. You could think about kind of the big beats. I'm sorry I'm using another cliche, but you could, you know, think about what are the big beats you want to have, and that can help, you know, it can help drive a program, even if you can't spend a lot of time doing it. And then you think, you know, but I'm really going to, like, 3 months before launch, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. You know, the previous time I've only got 15 hours a week. I'm going to be development like 90% of the time. But you would say, I'm going to do 10% on marketing, and that'll give you some structure and, you know, kind of an intelligent approach to it, even if your time is limited. And as Justin was saying, at some point, you know, maybe 2 months before launch or 3 months before launch, you say, I'm going to allocate some money to, if I can't do it myself, have someone help me with it.
You could also have someone on your team spearhead it,
Yeah.
you know, or create a plan, spend like a week creating a plan for marketing, and then have some interns help you with some of the social outreach, work with someone on Elance, or have someone on your team who's really good at that, vocalizing that, to help you with your marketing campaign.
Cool, thanks guys.
Hello? Oh,
Hi.
okay, good. How abstract or rigid should your marketing plan be when you're developing it, or when you're brainstorming on it in the beginning of development?
I was going to say, I think your plan should be really rigid, but you should be flexible on your plan, if that makes any sense. So you create a concrete plan.
Right, you create a guideline.
It's just, yeah, you create guidelines and you have to iterate on it. It's just like game production. It's just another aspect of game production. When you create your plan for producing a game, you're going to have an idea and a vision of what you want, but you're never going to stick to that because you know some things aren't going to work, the timing doesn't work, the press that you wanted to look at your game aren't going to look at it when you want it, but at least you have these guidelines to go by, and then you know adjust accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's very few marketing plans that I've done that have held up from like development time to execution time. They, you know, almost all the time, you know, date shift or detail shift, and you know, a great military quote is, you know, there's very few battle plans that survive contact with the enemy. You know, it's the same kind of thing that create a plan, give yourself structure, but it's just the same. Be flexible and be ready to, you know, adjust it as you need to.
Yeah, you would drive yourself crazy if you just create a plan. You're like, oh, this isn't working. You know what I mean? You can't force stuff. Yeah. You gotta go with the flow.
And I think development's probably the same way. I don't know anything about it as a developer, but I suspect, you know, that same kind of mentality
exactly
is
the
useful.
same.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Hey guys, great talk. I'm currently building a fairly hardcore PC title, and I find most marketing resources are geared towards casual and mobile game sort of platforms, where I think the consumers are much less educated about the product they're buying and can be much more influenced by marketing. You talked about Super Comboman being more on the hardcore side. Have you got any other tips for influencing the more hardcore market?
I think that's changing, and you know, casual was where mobile was, and now that's shifting to more hardcore. You could see it in the Korean and Japanese markets, and you're getting a lot more people who used to work in the industry that want to help market hardcore games. You got to kind of figure your niche, and so I've been working part-time as an influencer marketer, and what that means is, you know, working with YouTubers and Twitch streamers and people in the Vine community, Instagram community, to help boost up your community for your game. So you got to kind of figure the different chess, it sounds corny, but different chess pieces that will help boost the visibility of your game. And if you create a plan, you could work with someone like Joel, or I keep like, you know, boosting him up, but you could work with someone who's strategic that can help you with that. When I was working with Adult Swim, just an example is when I was working with them, they were just shooting it out to every Twitch streamer, and that didn't really help us. So I actually formulated a plan that I wanted to work with them on that would shoot it to the right trajectory. Yeah. Unfortunately, we did it a little late. But if you're even thinking about working with a publisher or outside, you should kind of cultivate a vision of who your gamer is, and you want to connect with that person. So, you know, personality is key in figuring out how you want to relate to them and connect with them with different influencers in the market.
Yeah. So this, you know, in terms of YouTubers, there's this YouTubers megalist that I have a link from it on the indie game, indiemarketer.com. So that's a tremendous resource. It's got a lot of YouTubers by follower size. It's got contact information you could get, and it also talks about genres they follow. Events can be super useful for getting to core gamers. You know, PAX is amazing. The Indie Mega Booth at PAX is a great avenue to get there. PR is another great way to reach core gamers. Again, it's like, you know, can you get through to them? I think is it can be challenging, but it's important. So it's worth the attention, but also have other things in your marketing mix that can help supplement you if you're not getting the coverage. So I think we might have one last question we could cover, and then we're going to get to the end of our time. Or are we out of time?
Hi.
One more? Yeah, okay.
Time or no? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have time for the last question.
What's a good percentage of your budget to dedicate towards a launch?
You know, a traditional would be 10 to 15%. For marketing is your question, right?
Yeah, just for the launch or the whole year?
You know, I would say marketing 10 to 15% of what you want your revenues to be is the way I would approach it. Like, what's my target revenues, and then carve out 10 to 15%. That's sort of a formula that's used in the marketing world.
But I'm sorry, before revenue.
before it
I
being
think
like,
budget,
like
it's be 10 to 15% of your budget straight up.
Yeah.
That's why I was trying to figure out when I was working with my marketing plan. It really brought light to that. I was like, oh shit, like,
yeah.
oh crap, sorry.
All right.
But you know, but
It's
from a
over.
practical point of view, I think there's so many startup studios that they're bootstrapped and they're kind of living day to day and week to week, and the majority of the time there's people just they don't have the budget to support it. So that's why the programs that we talked about here and the programs that will often get executed are I try and go for lean programs. I mean I'm used to working in bigger studios, and I had to sort of adapt my approach when I'm working with indies.
And what is the AAA budget for like a launch?
Well, again, that's like the 10 to 15% of expected revenues is the number that I would work on in that world.
So same for indie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to remind you to please fill out your evaluations. They're super useful to us as well as GDC. I think you'll be getting an email like right after this session, so I encourage you to please do that. And we'll stick around for a few minutes, and thank you all for coming.